Imagine that every time you fall in love, you are betting your house key, your bank account number, and your emotional code on a spinning roulette wheel in the dark. You don't see the ball spin. You don't hear the sound. You only find out if you won or lost when you're already outside, naked, emotionally bankrupt, trying to figure out exactly where you lost. This is the reality for millions of men who enter relationships thinking they are finding security. But in reality, they are being attracted by one of the most asymmetrical structures in modern society, the relationship game. The difference? At least in the casino, the rules are written on the door. Out here, everything seems like love, until it becomes a sentence. The thesis of this video is simple, brutal, and necessary. Every woman is a dice, and if you don't understand the game, you will inevitably be the one that falls. It doesn't matter how smart, successful, or emotionally available you are. Seduction, connection, desire, all of these elements are volatile. And as every good gambler knows, you never bet big on a game you don't even understand. So if you still think love is safe territory, maybe it's time to find out how tilted the tables are. The most dangerous type of game is the one in which the player does not know he is playing. And that is exactly where the silent tragedy of millions of men begins. They do not enter into relationships aware of the risk. They enter with hope. They enter with thirst. They enter believing that reciprocity is a natural rule of affection, when in fact, it is a statistical rarity. From an early age, we are trained by movies, songs, and romantic ideologies to believe that true love is a matter of total surrender, blind trust, and unconditional faith. The problem is that, while men are busy idealizing a type of pure affection, the world around them continues to function according to other rules, and they are usually the ones that the average man ignores. Deep down, what seems to be an invitation to love is often a simulation of loyalty that only lasts as long as there are benefits, validation, or convenience. This is the invisible game. You bet based on implicit promises, while the other side plays with hidden clauses. Emotional addiction is born from the ignorance of this contract. Because what you call love can actually be dopamine with a script, anxiety with perfume, and dependence disguised as destiny. And this explains why so many men stay in relationships in which they are ignored, diminished, or discarded. Not because they are weak, but because they have been trained to confuse emotional pain with proof of love. Psychologist Carl Jung said that, "What you do not make conscious will become your destiny." Nothing better defines the relationship pattern of most men. They go in blind, follow instincts, and drown in what they believe to be emotional depth, but it is just an uncharted illusion. The tragedy is compounded because the beginning of passion, that magical heat of the first encounters, is not love. It is a functional hallucination. A biochemical cocktail of dopamine, serotonin, and unconscious projections. You are not loving the real person. You are loving an idea that you yourself created, based on minimal signs, maximum idealizations, and desires that have been stored since adolescence. Nietzsche said that love is the state in which man sees things as they are not. And this is the curse. The man who doesn't understand the game loves with his eyes closed. He turns any attention into proof of interest, any smile into intention, and any sex into security. And the modern relationship market, fast-paced, saturated, narcissistic, is fertile ground for this type of emotional blindness. Because the more a man projects, the more he invests. And the more he invests, the more he fears losing. And this fear of losing what he idealized is what keeps him on the leash of illusion. It is in this cycle that the emotional worshiper is born, the man who loves too much, gives too much, and expects a proportional return, but forgets that the market for affection is not controlled by logic. The reality is cold. Reciprocity is not guaranteed. Commitment is not automatic, and what begins with sweet promises can end in emotional silence. And when it ends, the man asks himself, "How did I not see this coming?" Simple. Because no one warned him that he was playing. He thought he was building. Deep down, many men do not want love. They want someone to fill the emotional hole of childhood, the lack of validation, the emptiness that society never allowed them to verbalize. But no woman came into the world to heal wounds that you yourself don't understand. That's the brutal lesson. As long as you think you're safe in a game you don't understand, you'll always be the unlucky one at the table. And the worst part? You won't even realize you're losing. You'll call it love. You'll call it loyalty. You'll call it destiny. But deep down, you'll just be watching your chips disappear, one by one, in a game where you never read the rules. At this point, if you understand that you are playing a game, the next question is inevitable. How do you play without losing everything? This is where the golden rule of professional gamblers comes in, and it is exactly where most men fail catastrophically. Experienced gamblers do not gamble with what they need to live. They have what they call a kitty, a separate reserve, an emotional and financial risk capital that can be lost without compromising their very existence. In the relationship game, this translates into a simple but ignored rule. Never invest more emotionally or materially than you can bear to lose. It seems obvious, but it is almost revolutionary in today's scenario. Because modern romanticism sells the idea that true love is total surrender. And female culture, in particular, reinforces this concept with an almost religious conviction. If it's not everything, it's not worth it. But think about it. When the casino demands that you bet your house, your soul, and your stability to play, that is not love. It is manipulation disguised as passion. And when a man accepts these conditions, he is not being brave. You are being an accomplice to your own downfall. True courage is not about betting everything. It is about knowing what not to put on the table. Because what many call loving intensely is, in practice, emotional compulsion disguised as depth. And compulsion has a price: depersonalization, loss of focus, erosion of one's own sense of identity. The man who gives himself too much ceases to be an individual and becomes an extension of someone else's desire. And this is where the line between love and self-destruction dissolves. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, "Do not cling to anything that you cannot abandon in a fire." In the emotional game, the fire always comes. And if you do not have a separation between who you are and who you love, everything turns to ash. This separation is where true power lies. The man who keeps his core intact, who does not confuse passion with fusion, becomes strategically dangerous. He loves with presence, but not with dependence. He offers affection, but retains his autonomy. He gives space, but never begs for it in return. This is the man who plays with kitty, because he understands that the game is addictive, but not fair. And precisely for this reason, he doesn't play to lose himself. He plays to understand. While others sink into bonds that drain energy, time, and peace, he remains anchored in something non-negotiable: his own axis. The all-or-nothing fallacy is a trap that always benefits the other side. It's the casino asking you to emotionally all in under the promise of a jackpot that never comes. Those who demand your total surrender before proving consistency are only testing your level of neediness. And here's the brutal truth. Many women don't fall in love with the man who is too available. They fall in love with the man who loves himself enough to be selective. Total surrender is admired but rarely valued, because anything that comes too easily loses its flavor of challenge. The art of seduction has always been about scarcity and unpredictability, never about absolute availability. It's not about playing childish games or feigning disinterest. It's about emotional control. A man who masters this control doesn't get lost in the face of beauty, attention, or sex. He observes, he measures, he evaluates whether it's worth expanding his investment. He's like an experienced investor who doesn't get excited about promises, but rather about long-term consistency. He understands that true connection is proven over time, not with premature intensity. And here comes the great contradiction that you need to accept. You won't necessarily feel the most intense emotions with someone who makes you feel good. Often, the greatest emotional heat comes from unstable relationships, unpredictable people, and dysfunctional dynamics. Intensity is no guarantee of depth. Sometimes, it's just a sign that you're in volatile territory. And that's when the trained man retreats. He doesn't chase the emotional peak. He seeks strategic stability. Because he's already understood that adrenaline is easy. Peace is rare. If you need to bet everything to feel something, maybe the problem isn't in the game, but in the player. Maybe you've numbed yourself so much emotionally that you only recognize love when it hurts. And that's addiction, not romance. True power isn't in loving more, it's in loving better. With intelligence, with filter, with discipline. Uncontrolled passion holds you hostage. Strategic love turns you into a master of the board. And when you get to that point, it doesn't matter what dice you roll, you never play with what you can't afford to lose. Because you've learned to play like the pros. And that changes everything. You can be the most prepared, the coolest, the most strategic man. You can follow all the rules, maintain control, limit your investment, calculate every move. But even so, the house always wins. And this is not an invitation to give up. It is a brutal warning about how the game is designed so that you, at some point, will lose. Not because you are stupid, not because you lack technique, but because the board has been tilted before you even get to the table. In a society where more than 70% of divorces are initiated by women, where property laws, child custody, and public narrative favor one side, it is naive to think that the game is fair. And yet, most men enter the emotional casino believing that they will walk away with the prize. They don't. They walk away with scars. There is only one way to keep playing and survive: to understand that vulnerability is inevitable, but weakness is a choice. The difference between them is that vulnerability is strategic. You open yourself up cautiously, observing, adjusting, withdrawing when necessary. Weakness is emotionally promiscuous. You strip yourself naked at the first sign of attention, and when you do, the house is already counting its chips. Because what destroys you is not the breakup, it's how much you lose yourself in it. And the more you forget, the more power the other side accumulates. Learn to observe. Not what she says, but what she repeats. Not what she shows, but what she hides. The pattern is the clue. The rhythm is the password. Every woman leaves traces, and those who play attentively decipher them. The problem is that the average man ignores the signs because he wants to believe in the exception. He sees control and calls it a strong personality. He sees coldness and calls it mystery. He sees selfishness and calls it trauma. And so he walks smilingly into emotional traps designed to seem like salvation. And when he realizes it, he no longer knows who he is. But the man who has learned to play with cold blood, with an analytical eye and firm limits, does not give in. He goes in, tries it out, tests it, and when he sees that the house is starting to win too much, he gets up. No drama, no speeches, he just gets up. Because in the end, the real gambler doesn't need to win all the time. He just needs to know exactly when to quit. And that ability to preserve himself is what turns an ordinary man into a master of the game. In the end, love is a game, but not one of luck, but of perception. The men who survive are not the most romantic, they are the most conscious. Because in love, as in the casino, those who don't understand the risks become the fallen chip and never get up again. So if this video made you think, comment below. What was your biggest emotional bet and how much did you lose? Like, share, and follow the channel. Because in the next video, I'm not going to teach you how to play better. I'm going to show you how to turn the bank